All right, so today we're diving into something a bit different. And it's actually based on a book you recommended to me,
Right.
Kristen Butler's The Comfort Zone.
Yeah.
And I was really intrigued by this,
I'm excited to talk about it.
because we always hear about this idea, right? Like, to achieve anything worthwhile,
Right.
you have to push yourself outside your comfort zone.
Yes.
That growth happens outside that comfy little bubble.
Yeah.
But Butler kind of flips this whole concept on its head.
Totally.
And she argues that a fulfilling life, like truly a fulfilling life,
Yeah.
is created within, get this, an expanded comfort zone.
Right.
So not outside of it,
Yeah.
but within an expanded version of it.
And it's so counterintuitive to what we've always been told.
It is.
All of the mantras that we've heard over and over again growing up.
Yeah.
No pain, no gain.
Right.
Push yourself.
Right.
Like any teacher worth their salt will tell you, you've got to get uncomfortable
Absolutely.
if you want to achieve anything. But her premise, and what I find so interesting about this book, is that constantly being uncomfortable actually depletes our internal resources.
That makes sense.
If you think about it,
Yeah.
like if you're constantly in a state of stress, how much energy do you really have left to learn and grow?
Right. Yeah. You're just surviving.
Exactly. You're just
right.
in that fight or flight mode constantly.
Yeah.
So what she's suggesting is that true flourishing, really getting to that next level,
Yeah.
comes from building a sense of safety, a sense of ease first,
Yeah.
and then expanding from that foundation.
Interesting.
And clearly this has resonated with a lot of people.
It seems like it.
You see right at the beginning, she has endorsements from people like Lewis Howes,
Yeah.
Bex King, Dr. Amy Shaw.
Huge names.
So there's something to this for sure.
Yeah. And this isn't just some theory for her.
No, not at all.
This is really rooted in her own personal journey. She talks about feeling consistently criticized throughout her childhood for just being herself.
Oh, wow.
Whether she was too loud, too quiet, too sensitive,
Right.
too emotional.
Yeah, we all get those messages.
Yeah. And she internalized a lot of this, right?
Yeah.
And over time, she says this really eroded her own self-belief.
I can only imagine.
And so,
Yeah.
that constant push to be someone else, to fit into some mold that wasn't natural for her,
Right.
ultimately led to burnout,
Yeah.
panic attacks, and eventually she had to leave college.
Oh, wow.
She just couldn't
Yeah.
handle it anymore.
I mean, that makes sense, though.
It does. It does.
I feel like that's a very relatable story, I think, for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And what's really fascinating is that
Yeah.
when this happened, instead of realizing that maybe this constant pushing was the problem,
Right.
her initial instinct was actually to double down.
Oh, wow.
So she entered what she calls the survival zone, where she was still driven to achieve.
Right.
She achieved a lot of success
Yeah.
in online ventures, for example.
Right.
But she was doing it all while completely ignoring all those internal signs of stress and overwhelm.
Right. So she was still living in that backwards world that we're going to talk about,
Okay.
but just in a different zone of living.
Yeah. It wasn't until she really allowed herself to step into her comfort zone,
Oh, interesting.
to prioritize her own well-being, that she experienced what she says was a real turning point.
Okay.
And it was pretty profound for her.
Yeah.
She describes it as finally giving herself permission to heal
That's huge.
and to create a life that truly resonated with her at her own pace and in her own way.
I love that.
And the results are pretty compelling. She talks about overcoming anxiety and depression without medication,
Wow.
significant weight loss,
Look at her.
even being able to conceive after being told it wasn't possible.
Yeah.
And building this hugely successful brand, Power of Positivity, going from bankruptcy to financial abundance.
That's amazing.
So it's a pretty powerful testament to her approach, wouldn't you say?
It is. It is. And it really speaks to this idea that sometimes letting go
Yeah.
and allowing ourselves to be comfortable can actually unlock so much more than
Yeah.
we ever thought possible.
Yeah.
And it is from this personal transformation that she develops a broader critique
Yeah.
of what she calls our backwards world.
I love that concept.
So she's arguing that we've become so fixated on this idea that discomfort is this necessary ingredient
Right.
for progress
Yeah.
that we almost shame those who are content and comfortable.
Right. Like you're not working hard enough.
Exactly.
You're not hustling.
You're not grinding.
Right.
We admire the person who's constantly grinding, sacrificing their sleep and relationships for work.
Always on.
Always always on.
Right.
But, think about it. When people are on their deathbeds, do they ever say, I wish I had worked more?
Right. They regret the things they didn't do.
Exactly. They regret not spending enough time with loved ones, not taking that trip, not pursuing those passions.
Right.
So it's this backwards way of thinking that I think is so pervasive in our culture.
And she uses a great analogy, right?
Yes.
She talks about, imagine a banquet table overflowing with delicious food.
Yeah.
Right? But instead of just partaking in this abundance, we insist on going out into the wilderness to forage for scraps.
I love that analogy, yeah. It's like, what are we doing? Because it highlights the absurdity.
It does.
Of this mentality that we've all kind of bought into, that we have to struggle to earn our worthiness.
Exactly.
And our joy and our peace.
When what we truly desire might actually be right there in front of us.
Exactly. And accessible through nurturing our inner comfort.
I love that.
Right. And expanding from there.
Yeah. So it's not about stagnation, right?
Yeah.
It's about creating this foundation.
Exactly. It's the fertile ground. Yes.
For sustainable growth.
I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And making uncomfortable the danger zone, essentially, for long-term well-being.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a complete reframing.
Yeah. It's like this paradigm shift.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And this brings us to what I think is a really core element of her argument, which is the power of our beliefs.
Yes. So fundamental to everything.
And she references the work of Michael Shermer,
Okay.
who suggests that we often form our beliefs first and then actively seek out evidence to confirm them.
Right. So we see what we believe, essentially.
Yeah, it's almost like we're
That's right.
filtering out all the evidence that doesn't fit with our preconceived notions.
Right.
Yeah, and that can be so limiting, as she points out, especially if our fundamental beliefs about ourselves or what's possible for us are negative or unhelpful.
Absolutely, because those beliefs become self-fulfilling prophecies.
Exactly.
Right? They shape our reality because they dictate our actions. And she emphasizes how deeply ingrained these beliefs can become.
Right. They get programmed in early.
Yeah, particularly if they took root in childhood.
Right, when we're so impressionable.
And we spend years, she says, accumulating evidence to support them.
Yeah.
Right? Even if that evidence is flawed or based on misinterpretations.
Absolutely.
And, the book even lists some common limiting beliefs that people have about the comfort zone itself.
It's interesting, right?
Like that it's this fixed state.
That you can't grow there.
Or that if you're comfortable, you must be lazy or complacent.
Right, you're not trying hard enough.
Right. Or that your dreams will just wither and die if you're not constantly striving.
It's like this fear-based mentality around comfort.
Yeah, so how do we break free of that?
So to kind of set the stage for how we typically function, she introduces the 3 zones of living.
Yeah, okay.
The first is the survival zone, which, as she experienced, is about coping with adversity, often pushing through while ignoring those underlying stress signals.
I'm basically white-knuckling it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then there's a complacent zone, which is characterized by stagnation, lack of growth, or forward movement.
Right.
And then finally, there's the comfort zone.
Yes.
Which, crucially, is not about staying static, but rather a place of ease and flow, and from which, she argues, true and sustainable expansion happens.
Okay.
So the key insight here is that she reframes comfort not as stagnation, but as this fertile ground for sustainable growth.
Got it.
And she makes uncomfortable the danger zone for long-term well-being.
So we're really focusing our conversation today on understanding how we can cultivate and operate within this expanded comfort zone.
Absolutely.
So one of the really fundamental aspects of this comfort zone approach, according to Butler, is the development of self-esteem and self-trust.
So important.
And she argues that constantly forcing ourselves into these uncomfortable situations can actually damage these essential qualities.
Yeah, and it's so counterintuitive because we think we're building resilience, we think we're toughening ourselves up, but in actuality, we're creating this negative feedback loop where we're constantly proving to ourselves that we're not good enough.
Right. And how does that manifest?
Well, she uses this great analogy, Brené Brown's marble jar.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Right. Trust, whether it's with others or with ourselves, is built through small, consistent, positive actions, like keeping promises, being reliable.
Right.
But it can also be broken by those small acts of betrayal, like ignoring our own needs and boundaries. So when we consistently override our own comfort levels and push ourselves into situations where we feel like we can't succeed, we're essentially taking marbles out of our own self-trust jar.
And she talks about, especially,
Yeah.
childhood experiences could be so impactful.
Right. That's when the jar is being formed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So imagine a child who is constantly being pushed beyond their limits, told they're not good enough.
Yeah.
They're going to start to internalize that.
Yeah.
Right? And that's going to impact how they view themselves.
On their ability to trust themselves.
Exactly.
Right.
And she also touches on the physiological impact of constantly operating outside our comfort zone.
Yeah.
She references Dr. Jill Bull-Taylor's work on the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain.
Right.
And when we're in unfamiliar or perceivedly threatening situations, our amygdala kicks in and it prioritizes survival over growth.
So it actually shuts down our ability to learn.
Exactly. It's like this primal response that overrides our higher cognitive functions.
Wow. And, I've definitely experienced that.
Yeah.
Where I'm so stressed out
Yeah.
that I can't think straight.
Exactly. You're not in that creative flow state.
No, you're just reacting.
Right. You're not able to access those higher level thinking skills that are so essential for growth and expansion.
So what's the solution?
So Butler emphasizes this crucial internal shift.
Oh, okay.
A move toward cultivating inner comfort.
Yeah.
By listening to our inner wisdom.
That's so hard to do these days.
It is, because it's constantly being drowned out by external pressures.
Right, all the noise.
Right, all the noise, societal expectations.
Right.
And she shares her own experience of rediscovering this inner guidance after feeling like she had lost everything. She really hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
And she realized that she had to start listening to herself again.
Yeah.
And for her, feeling good became a vital indicator.
Okay.
Like a compass directing her towards her comfort zone.
So it's not just about pushing through the discomfort, but actually seeking out what feels good.
Exactly. And it's not about being passive or withdrawing from life.
Right.
This comfort zone that she's talking about is this inner sanctuary where we can find peace and still achieve meaningful things.
Yeah.
And she stresses the importance of establishing healthy boundaries, both physical, like the personal space we need, and personal, defining how we expect to be treated.
Okay.
And self-care also becomes paramount, right?
Yeah.
Encompassing our physical, mental, emotional, even spiritual well-being as a way to nurture this internal sense of safety.
Yeah.
And she even mentions the C pyramid.
C pyramid.
Yeah, S-E. Safety, expression, enjoyment.
I like that.
So it's this framework for building this inner sanctuary.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that feeling safe is the foundation.
Right.
Which then allows for authentic expression, ultimately leading to enjoyment in our lives.
So it all builds on itself.
Exactly. It's a hierarchical process.
Okay, so we've built this foundation of inner safety.
Yes.
Now what?
Now she explores the power of words and self-image.
Okay.
She explains that our self-image, which often takes shape in childhood, profoundly influences how we express ourselves and interact with the world.
Right. So if you have a negative self-image, you're going to act in ways that reinforce that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when our actions and choices align with our authentic selves, operating within our comfort zone, they become genuine expressions of who we are.
Right. So it's about being true to ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And she really underscores the significance of making intentional choices rather than simply reacting to external circumstances.
That's huge.
Right. Because when we're reacting, we're essentially giving our power away.
Yeah.
Right? We're letting external factors dictate our behavior.
We're not in control.
Exactly.
Right.
But when we're making intentional choices, we're taking back our power.
We're being proactive.
We're being proactive, and we're aligning our actions with our values.
And she also talks about the importance of eliminating negative self-talk.
So important.
Right, that inner critic.
Yeah, that voice that's constantly telling us we're not good enough.
Right.
Or we're going to fail. Or we're not worthy.
Yeah, it can be so debilitating.
It can be. And it can sabotage our efforts to create the life we want.
So how do we quiet that voice?
So she advocates for using affirmations and mantras as tools to reshape our internal dialogue and focus our attention on what we desire.
Right, so it's about replacing those negative thoughts.
Exactly, with positive and empowering ones.
And she offers some key principles for creating effective affirmations.
Yeah, so first, they should be stated positively.
Oh.
Right? So instead of saying, I'm not going to fail, you would say, I am successful.
Got it.
They should be general enough to feel believable and resonate with you.
Right.
They should be phrased in the present tense as if they're already true.
Right.
And most importantly, they should evoke positive feelings.
Okay.
And if an affirmation feels too far-fetched initially, she suggests using a bridge phrase
A bridge phrase like?
I'm in the process of, or I'm open to gradually bring it within your realm of belief.
So it feels more attainable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about meeting yourself where you are.
And then building from there.
Exactly.
Okay, now, a crucial aspect of living well within our comfort zone, I think, is how we navigate our emotions.
Yes. Our emotional landscape is constantly changing.
It is.
Right? It's like the weather.
Right.
There are storms, there are sunny days.
Exactly.
And she contrasts being swept away by these emotional storms with the idea of accepting them and allowing them to pass without judgment or resistance.
That's so hard to do.
It is, because we're so conditioned to react to our emotions.
Right.
But what she's suggesting is that we can actually choose how we respond.
Okay.
And that's a really empowering concept.
So we don't have to be at the mercy of our emotions.
Exactly. We can be in the driver's seat.
Right.
And she briefly introduces her RARE method.
RARE method.
Yeah. Recognize, accept, redefine, evolve
Okay.
as a tool for releasing negative thoughts and emotions.
And how does that work?
So it's a process of becoming aware of the feeling, allowing it to be present without judgment, consciously choosing a more helpful thought to replace the negative one,
Okay.
and thereby shifting your emotional state.
So it's like a cognitive reframing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's about taking back control of our emotional experience.
Oh, I like that.
The concise takeaway here is, by acknowledging and accepting our emotions without judgment, we gain the power to consciously reshape them,
Okay.
turning emotional reactivity into mindful responsiveness.
Okay, so we're not suppressing our emotions.
No.
We're not ignoring them.
No, we're acknowledging them, we're accepting them,
Yeah.
but we're not letting them control us.
Okay.
And she also discusses the 3 phases of acclimation
Okay.
to new experiences.
Okay.
So first, they feel unfamiliar and uncomfortable.
Right, like learning a new skill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then, as we get used to them, they become familiar and uncomfortable.
So you're still not quite there yet.
Exactly. You're still kind of awkward and clumsy. And then finally, with more practice and integration, they shift to familiar and comfortable.
So it becomes part of your extended comfort zone.
Exactly. It's no longer this thing that you dread or avoid.
Right.
It's something that you can do with ease and enjoyment.
And she uses a great example of learning to dance.
Yes.
Initially, it's awkward outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Then you get more familiar with the steps, but you still have to think about them.
Right.
And then eventually it just becomes this natural, enjoyable part of who you are.
Exactly. It's integrated into your being.
I like that.
Right.
So we've talked about cultivating this inner sanctuary.
Yes.
Right? This foundation of self-esteem, self-trust, being able to navigate our emotions.
Absolutely.
But now what?
This leads us to the second step in Butler's Create with Comfort process. Develop where you are going.
Okay.
So having a clear understanding of your current state, which the earlier parts of the book guide you in, is vital.
Yeah.
But equally important is having a compelling vision of where you want to head. So she introduces the idea of the expanded self.
Expanded self.
Which is a deliberate and specific vision of your future self,
Okay.
who has already achieved your aspirations.
So it's like a mental picture.
Exactly, of who you want to become.
Okay.
And she shares this great example of her friend Sarah,
Okay.
who envisioned Boss Babe Betty,
Boss Babe Betty.
the version of herself who had successfully landed a management position.
Okay.
And by vividly imagining this expanded self, how she carried herself, her beliefs, her actions, Sarah began to identify the limiting beliefs that were holding her back from embodying that version of herself.
So it's almost like trying it on.
Exactly, like trying on a new outfit and seeing how it feels.
Yeah.
And what's significant here is that you don't need to have every single step mapped out to get there.
Oh, that's good to know.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we often can't foresee all the resources and opportunities that will become available to us once we have that clear intention.
Right. The how will reveal itself.
Exactly. The how will unfold.
Yeah.
And she even refers to the limitations of our senses as a gift, because they compel us to focus on our preferences and deliberately create what we truly desire rather than getting bogged down in endless possibilities.
So less is more. In a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Constraint can be a catalyst for creativity.
And to help solidify this vision of our expanded self and the life we desire.
Yes.
She presents the Comfort Zone Vision Board.
Yes.
And I love this because it's not your typical vision board.
No, it's not just a collage of random images.
Right. It has a very specific circular design
Yes.
with 3 distinct rings.
And each ring has a specific purpose.
Right. So the central ring is dedicated to our current wins and accomplishments, the things we've already achieved.
Exactly.
That we're proud of.
Right, because it serves as a powerful reminder that you have the capacity to create what you want.
That you've done it before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've already proven to yourself.
You're not starting from scratch.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the next ring outward is where you place images and words that represent your expanded self.
Okay.
Their accomplishments, their lifestyle, the qualities they possess.
So this is where you get to dream big.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the outermost ring is reserved for the feelings you associate with this expanded self.
That's how you want to feel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Joy, confidence, freedom, whatever resonates most strongly with your vision.
I love that.
And the circular design itself is intended to mirror the natural process of expansion that occurs when we operate from a place of inner comfort.
So it's like a visual representation of this whole concept.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got this vision.
Yes.
How do we actually start moving towards it?
So this is where she stresses the critical role of habits and identity.
Okay.
Her argument is that our sense of identity is the primary driver of consistent habits.
So it's not about willpower.
No, it's about alignment.
Alignment.
With who we believe ourselves to be.
Right. So if we see ourselves as someone who is healthy, we're more likely to engage in healthy habits.
Exactly. It becomes effortless.
Yeah.
It's not something we have to force ourselves to do.
It's just who you are.
Exactly. It's integrated into your being.
And she encourages us to take a close look at the identity that our current habits are reinforcing.
Right. Because our habits are essentially a reflection of our beliefs.
Right.
About ourselves.
Yeah.
So if we're engaging in habits that are not serving us, it's a sign that we need to re-examine our beliefs.
And she also highlights the crucial influence of our environment.
So important.
In supporting our desired habits.
Right, because our environment can either facilitate or significantly hinder our progress.
Yeah, if you're trying to eat healthy and your house is full of junk food.
Exactly, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Right.
So it's about creating an environment that supports your goals.
Okay, so what happens when the path we're on no longer feels right?
Yeah, because life is about evolving.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about staying stagnant.
Right.
And she shares this great story of Marcia, who transitioned from a high-pressure corporate career to real estate investments.
Okay.
After a period of rest and self-reflection.
Right. She took some time to reassess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it really underscores the point that it's perfectly okay and even beneficial to change direction if it leads to greater joy and fulfillment within your expanded comfort zone.
And it's okay to not know
Absolutely.
what it looks like.
Yeah, you don't have to have all the answers.
Yeah.
You can just follow your intuition.
Okay, so this brings us to what I think is a really important distinction that she makes between problem-centric thinking and solution-centric thinking.
Yes, these are two very different mindsets.
Right.
Problem-centric thinking tends to dwell on what's not working.
Yeah.
It fuels fear. It leads to reactive action.
Right. It's like a downward spiral.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Solution-centric thinking, on the other hand, is fueled by trust, a sense of safety, and hope for the future.
So it's about focusing on what you want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rather than what you don't want.
And she even suggests a powerful exercise called Feeling the Solution.
Yes.
Where you vividly visualize and journal about your problem being completely resolved.
Right. You write in the past tense.
Oh, interesting.
To make it feel more tangible and real.
So you're almost tricking your mind into believing it's already happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a way to reprogram your subconscious.
I like that, to align with your desired outcome.
Absolutely.
So to further nurture this inner comfort and facilitate personal growth, she delves into the power of mindset and relationships.
Yes.
She briefly mentions meditation.
Yeah, such a valuable tool.
As a valuable tool.
For our mental, physical, and spiritual well-being.
Right. And noting its benefits.
Yeah.
For improving focus and reducing stress.
Right. And she doesn't go too deep into it. But she just acknowledges its importance in cultivating that inner peace.
Okay, and then when it comes to relationships.
Yes.
She introduces these interesting concepts.
Yeah.
Of gluminary and luminary relationships.
I love these terms.
Yeah, so what are they?
So gluminary relationships are those where the primary connection is through shared pain, negativity, or